Excuse me. Trying to film a video about toy guns. Don't look at me like that. Hey. 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 So this video is going to be specific to using Glock or Glock-inspired airsoft pistols as a training tool for the actual Glock series of firearms. Hi, welcome to the channel. My name's James. I was a cop for like 8 years. I was in the Army for like 13 because I didn't want to go to college until my mid-30s. Also NRA basic and law enforcement pistol instructor certified, and I am a firearms instructor under the California Bureau of Security Investigative Services, and I do various CCW classes throughout different cities and counties for California. I'm also a huge airsoft nerd. I'm a KWA law enforcement ambassador, assistant manager for a field called the Airsoft Ministry, which is in Roseville, just a bunch of really just nerdy things. Good news is hopefully this video will help you kind of answer some questions before you start throwing money around, because you're probably a Glock shooter, you own a Glock, and you're looking for an airsoft gun that matches up with your current Glock that you own. If you've been searching around the internet, you've probably found a bunch of airsoft specific videos that didn't really go over the training aspect of a Glock. They were just like, well, this is a Glock airsoft gun, it's got a trigger, it's got sights. It is a bunch of airsoft nerds talking about airsoft stuff. Or, on the flip side, you've probably looked at some firearms videos using the airsoft Glocks. They didn't really know what they were doing either because they don't really have a background in airsoft. So hopefully I can kind of bridge that gap and speak both languages. Or I'm just going to completely screw this up. This is my Glock 23. There are many like it, but this one is mine. This was the gun I was using for my off-duty carry when I was a cop. This is my concealed carry gun. Anytime I'm carrying a gun, concealed, it's this bad boy. This lovely little pea shooter is the KWA ATP C. I will do a section specific to the ATP pistols later in this video. This lovely little thing is the Elite Force Glock 19. I'm going to be kind of going over the aesthetics, the look, the feel, the weight. We're going to be checking the trigger pull. We're going to be checking the actual weights of the gun themselves, all kinds of stuff. So we're going to start this off by comparing the Elite Force Glock 19 against the actual real Glock 23. Now, it is important to note that Elite Force, which is a subsidiary of Umerix, is the only company that actually has official Glock licensing rights, which is why you don't see any other Glock pistol being branded and sold in America except the Elite Force ones. The Spartan ones, I don't think there's a few other companies out there. I think Spartan makes one, some other ones make them. I don't know if they're officially licensed or if they are anymore. I also don't have a lot of knowledge about them because no one in Airsoft really uses those. Most of the information you're going to see about Airsoft Glocks are going to be about the Elite Force series of pistols. What about Tokyo Marui? Tokyo Marui does not have licensing. That's why you can't really buy them new in America, but you can buy them overseas. Wait, I think I waited about a month and a half for my Tokyo Marui Glock to come in the mail, and that was before Corona. So there's that. Also, Tokyo Maruis aren't that great out of the box. They kind of have a lot of problems, so unless you want to pay about 180 bucks, maybe closer to 200 to get the gun and get it shipped from overseas, and then drop maybe another $100 to $200 in parts to make it actually work correctly, let's just stick with the KWA or the Elite Force. How about that? Fun fact, this is marketed by Elite Force as the Glock 19, but it could also be marketed as the Glock 23 because any real shooter knows that the only difference between an actual Glock 19 and a Glock 23 is just the caliber that it fires. That's it. The dimensions are the same, the pistol's the exact same, except for the cartridge of round that you fire through it. So the KWA ATP pistol looks honestly a little bit more like a Smith & Wesson M&P in my opinion. It's a lot slimmer. Obviously there's the back part of the slide is a little bit more distinct and profound, and it has this kind of a backslash, I guess, or it has more of like an angle in the front of the slide, whereas the Glocks are a lot more blockier. They're a lot more like a rectangle. If you're looking for a training pistol, this shouldn't matter. It's an aesthetic quality. As trainers, we want to always make sure that our real guns never get confused with our training guns and vice versa. So for a training pistol, this is actually kind of a good thing. KWA makes the ATP, which is just the standard duty form of this. This is the KWA ATP C. And then they make the KWA ATP LE2, which comes with an orange frame, which FLETC has used. Various police departments have used those. I know because I've talked to them about it. And the reason they like that, especially the orange frame, is because it will not be confused with a duty gun. That's very important in our world. But you also have to keep in mind, all the airsoft kids want the airsoft Glock that looks like a Glock because they want to be Glock fanboys. They do not have a head for an airsoft gun as a training tool. They want it to look cool. This is going to have all the similar features as a Glock would. So starting with the sight systems are the same. Both of them have that kind of field goal style back sight, or the half square, and the single white dot front sight. So the sight systems are the exact same, which makes sense because they're Glock licensed, so no duh. So the sights you're going to notice actually aren't the same as the Glock pistol. The ATP C uses the 3-dot sight, so it's the 2 white dots on the back sight and then the 1 white dot on the front sight. This doesn't really matter. I mean, I would really love to see an example of where a training event failed because the back sight wasn't the same. Get real. The Elite Force Glocks also have the Glock, the Glock trigger safeties, and that is functional. This is not just the cosmetic thing they did. I am pushing on the side of this trigger right now, and it's not depressing. But if I pull the trigger normally and I depress the trigger safety first and then squeeze, I break the shot. So the trigger reset, or the sear reset, on this Elite Force Glock pistol isn't as profound as an actual Glock trigger reset, but that makes sense because the spring tensions are different. So that's why there's way less recoil in this compared to the actual Glock, because of the springs inside. So compared for an airsoft gun, trigger reset's pretty good. I would say this is about as good as you're gonna get with an airsoft gun. I saw in a previous Glock comparison video, a gentleman had commented on he felt like there was a pause in the trigger pull. I don't feel anything other than your standard factory slack, other than that. But once you get to the break point, it's a pretty smooth trigger pull compared to the actual trigger on a real Glock. Pretty smooth. Notice that it still does have the same trigger safety mechanism that a Glock does, and I cannot pull the trigger without first depressing the trigger safety. I like that. The reset is pretty much the same as the Elite Force Glock. There's not a huge felt reset in here, but again, the internal springs aren't as powerful as a real gun spring, so get over it. It's an airsoft gun. Relax. The actual pull itself feels pretty smooth. So the trigger function itself, pretty great. For an airsoft gun, this is pretty dang good. So let's just kind of do an anecdotal test. So I'm going to test both triggers. This one feels a little rougher, so I would say felt-wise, the ATP C pistol is easier to pull. This feels a little rougher. Some people might like that, some people might not. From a training perspective, I'm going to tell you from experience, you're not going to notice a difference. So the success and failure of your training event isn't going to depend on the smoothness of the trigger. We kind of see where I'm going with this video. They also break down in a similar fashion. Obviously the internals for the airsoft gun are going to be different, but you still have to use both sides of the takedown lever, I suppose is what we're going to call this one. They have a similar guide rod, and the internal slide designs are similar. About as similar as you can get before you actually have to factor in the specifics of the internal components. Can you put a Glock 23 recoil spring into a Elite Force Glock 19 airsoft gun? Yes. Yes, you can. It will shoot. You can do it. It's kind of a butt to get the slide back off, but you can take the spring from in the real Glock, put it in the Air Force Glock, the tension, and it will shoot. The tension on the slide is a lot more tight, tougher, stronger. I don't know what the real word would be. Working the slide's a lot more difficult, But also keep in mind that the Airsoft Glock was not designed for the actual spring from a Glock, so I don't know what kind of wear and tear that's going to do long term. And I'm telling you, as someone with a decent amount of experience in the shooting world, you're not going to get any additional training value out of putting a real spring into an Airsoft Glock. You are not going to get added training value. If anything, it's going to put more wear and tear on the internals of the gun because it was not designed for that. So don't do it. But you can physically put one into the other. But it's a stupid idea. But you do whatever you want. It's your money. Breaks down just like any other airsoft gun. The guide rod spring in the ATP C is a little bit shorter than the actual Glock one. So I don't think you can put your real Glock guide rod spring or your recoil spring into your ATP C. I just tried it a little bit. Didn't really seem to want to go in, so I'm not going to try and force it. If it doesn't want to go in on its own, we're just going to assume that it's not gonna, because I ain't trying to break this gun. Because I still want to shoot kids in the face with this thing on the weekend. This is a magazine for my Glock. I think this is for my 22. Yep, that's for my 22. So that's for my Glock 22. Let's see if a real Glock magazine will fit in an Airsoft Glock. Not really. Goes in a few inches and then it just sort of sticks in, and that's it. I really don't feel like jamming that bad boy in there. So, no, you cannot do that. So if you want to do like empty gun reloads or any sort of reloading drills, you're gonna have to use an actual Airsoft magazine. Keep in mind I'm left-handed. The feel of the Airsoft Glock, pretty similar. There's a little bit more texturing in this pattern. This is a Gen 3 because I'm in California, so this is just a Gen 3. This gun's only 2 years old, 3 years old, if that. And this is brand new. I got this in the mail maybe a week ago. So the pattern is similar. Notice the finger grooves for the grips are similar. They both have 3. The ATP C feels a lot slimmer, obviously because it's designed to be a little bit more slimline, especially in the grip. Whereas the Elite Force Glock grip, a little bulkier, but realistically, one is not superior to the other. Again, it's not going to be the success or failure of your training event because one feels slightly slimmer than the other. Both feel solid. When you rack the slide on an actual Glock, it's real smooth. There's nothing in the way, there's no obstructions, there's no nothing. When you rack the slide on one of these Airsoft Glocks from Elite Force, it feels like it's catching. Right here. Here's what I think this is. Notice as I open the slide, boom, we see inside the breech, what would normally be the breech, we see the airsoft nozzle. And at that little separation between the nozzle and the breech is what is causing that lack of total smoothness. This is going to be specific for every airsoft gun to a degree because that's an internal component for every airsoft pistol that I'm aware of. Is that going to impact training? No. Realistically, no. Here's the Glock racking to the rear. And going forward. Nice and metallic. Here's the ATP. Still pretty good. Still pretty profound. The frame on these bad boys is some kind of plasticky polymer, I don't know what. The slide is some kind of metal. I don't know exactly what metal it is. Maybe like a low-grade aluminum or, I don't know, melted down beer cans, who knows. But this is a plastic polymer frame with a metallic of some kind slide. So in that sense, it's also similar. The frame is, again, some kind of plastic or polymer. The slide is some sort of metal. It feels kind of like the same metal, maybe a little bit denser than the metal that's made out of the Elite Force Glock slide. Mag release on this thing's pretty good. It feels a little bit more like an extended mag release from like what you would get normally out from a regular Glock 23. But the mag release on this is really good, and the magazines drop real freely, so there's really no issues unless you've screwed something up. Magazine release on this is pretty good. It's pretty smooth. The magazine release button itself feels pretty good. It's nice and profound, so you know it's there. Both feel like the actual Glock, or similar to the actual Glock magazine release. This is an Alienware Glock 23 holster. This is a Blackhawk CQC, an older model, much older. I think this is about maybe 6 or 8 years old. And this is a TNT gun leather holster. This is my actual carry holster. Let's talk about that in a second. So with something like a leather holster, or if you're using a Kydex holster that's real tightened down, if there's a lot of passive retention in that holster, what you're gonna see, it pushes the slide back. That's not a big issue if you're training. All you gotta do is remember to do this. You should be fine. Relax. Blackhawk CQC holster, pretty good. Alienware holster, pretty good. And my actual leather carry holster, pretty good. Notice also, as the ATP goes into the holster, the leather holster, the slide does not go back on the ATP C. Whereas, same holster, Elite Force Glock, still back a little bit. See that right in there? It's not seated. Again, this isn't really going to be the success or failure of your training events. You just have to remember that your gun is ready to go in your holster. You have to do that with real guns anyway. So this is just an administrative step before you actually start your training. This is a leather mag pouch I bought from TNT Gun Leather for the Glock magazine. ATP fits in there pretty good. Elite Force Glock magazine fits in there pretty good. So let's weigh the Glock 23. 21.20 ounces. Let's weigh the Elite Force Glock. 13.75 ounces. Not too terribly off. Let's weigh the KWA ATP. 14.20 ounces. Granted, this is a Glock 22 magazine. This is also a big boy status. 2.70 ounces. Here's the Elite Force Glock magazine. I will note that I did take the base plate cover off, which might weigh a gram or not that much. 8.65 ounces. And the KWA ATP C magazine weighs 9.40 ounces. We will measure the slide just forward of the breech. 0.62, excuse me, 0.65 inches. Elite Force Glock. 0.62. KWA ATP. 0.54. Now we'll measure the frame just forward of the breech. About 3/4 of an inch, about 0.76 on the ATP. Elite Force Glock. 0.77. Actual Glock. 0.79. .5.0, 1.12, 2.14. Stay back, or the bunny gets it. 113.5. Let's do it at like a distance. So from like chest to like as far as my arm will go. 95. Here's the ATP. 111, arm's length. 92. So let's sum this up and finish this out by comparing sort of the pros and cons, or the benefits, different benefits and features. Not really pros and cons necessarily. Both of these are pretty much the same, with some, in my opinion, what are slight differences. So we'll start with the Elite Force Glock. Obviously, if you're looking for a Glock that looks like a Glock, so if the aesthetic is important to you, then you're going to want to go with the actual Glock that's been branded and licensed by Glock. So there's that. In my opinion, the recoil is a little bit stronger on this Glock pistol, but even then, the recoil on airsoft pistols as a whole ain't that big. Like, it's not significant enough to be the buying factor for one pistol versus the other, because neither one of these really have recoil that's worth a hoot. I think the only big strength or factor that the Elite Force Glocks have in them is a lot of people are making aftermarket parts and enhancement parts for this. So a lot of kids, when they buy them, they want to swap out a lot of the internal parts so they can get some more range out of it, or they can tighten the groups up slightly, or basically they just want to make it a more long-term usage gun. Doesn't necessarily make it a more effective training tool. So out of the box, this thing's pretty good. I will say I was having some issues with the hop up when it came to me out of the box. That could have been specific to this gun that I bought that was sent to me, but I did have to mess with a hop up on this, as you saw in the range video. These are also gonna run about 170 to 180, depending on who you're buying it from. The KWA ATP series pistols are a little cheaper. They run about 140 to 150 or so. KWA is currently selling at-home training kits with the ATP LE, which is the standard, the long edition. I believe you can specially order them for the ATP C if you just email them, be like, hey, I want this kit, I want it in this gun. You can get one of the KWA ATP training kits, which is gonna include a bag of 1,000 BBs, a can of gas, and 3 like soda can sized targets for about 104 or 105 bucks, and it comes with the ATP LE. So it's the standard, or basically the duty version of this. This is the compact version. If you email them and say, hey, I would like the ATP C with the training kit, I'm pretty sure, since you want to give them your money, they will accommodate you with that. Currently, to my knowledge, Elite Force does not have one of those kind of bundled kits. You can actually save a fair bit of money if you buy one of their training kits, because it comes with gas, BBs, and targets. That's the big selling factor. If you try and order gas online, there's a big shit. It's like a $20 shipping cost, and not a lot of places are going to have these kits or have the ability to assemble those kits in there. So that's one of the strengths that KWA has, where these guns are both essentially equal accuracy. They're both about as accurate as each other at 15, 7, and 5 yards. The sound is about as loud as the other. It's really not more distinctly louder than the other. The trigger pull is pretty fair on both. It's pretty equal. The holster fit, minus the issue that sometimes the Glock will have, the Elite Force Glock will have in some holsters with a little slide going out of battery. They're really not a big deal. As far as holster fit goes, they're pretty even. And the weight is pretty similar. So realistically, for training purposes, one is not better than the other. One is not superior to the other. They're pretty equal. It's just a matter of what do you want. My personal recommendation, and this is going to sound biased because I am a KWA law enforcement ambassador, I like the ATP because of the design and because you can get one with an orange frame. That's a personal thing, and that's coming from a dude that was a law enforcement trainer for a number of years. That to me is a big selling factor, because I don't want to put my Airsoft Glock in my carry holster. And if you think that doesn't happen, you need to Google, because there have been dudes that have been shot on airsoft fields with real guns because the dude forgot to swap the pistol out and he just brought his regular gun onto the field. For me, that's something that needs to be considered. It's not a selling factor, but it's something that should be considered. But if you really don't care about that, go with either one of these guns. One is not going to make your training events better than the other. As long as you're not stupid and you know what you're doing for training, you should be fine.
Caber, who the f*** are you, nerd?